is 5:05. I call this meeting of the CRCRC to order. We'll start with roll call.
Jay Van Bavel.
Brian Ryder.
Alex Robinette.
Dave Bench.
Duke Garwood.
Okay.
Tom Farrell.
And here comes
Tom
Ryan.
Farrell.
And Jeff.
Here.
We're-
And Jay Mark.
Speak your name, please.
Jeff Marks.
Very good. Thank you. Just right. Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda, which consists of one item. I would like to call your attention that one of the people who had,
Oh, did you skip public comment?
oh, excuse me, yeah, I'm gonna open it up. Well, let me do this first. If there is anyone here who is intending to make public comment this evening about either a general item or one of the specific things that are on the agenda, I'd appreciate if you would put your name on the roster over there, or ledger list. We want to make sure that we capture everybody's name correctly so that whenever the minutes are written, we've got all that information we need, okay? So, if anybody is planning to speak this evening, would you please do that right away? Good, all right. I'm gonna move on. Is there anybody here who is going to want to speak? Well, I'll wait for them to write their names.
Well, you can,
Well, they might want to speak right now, Brian.
about the minutes?
About anything, something that is off of the regular agenda. Okay. So, I'll take it back. Is there anybody here who wants to speak about anything that is not on the agenda this evening? All right, good. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's one item on there. There have been some recent edits to that document that happened today in response to one of the citizens who had spoken last week, wanting to ensure that, her words were emphasized. So what is now in the packet is an edited thing that's been done just a few hours ago.
I ran mine out a couple of days ago, so would you tell me what the amendments were? I don't have the packet as of right now, apparently.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I don't have the minutes, and I wasn't here, so I can't really vote yes or no on anything anyway, but if any substance.
If I'm, it was just one person who made comments who requested that the words more accurately reflected what she said. So we made some of the changes that she had asked for, and I rewatched the tape and made sure we got it accurate.
thank you, Desiree.
Mm-hmm.
Good? Is that, you happy with that, Brian?
I'll get a copy of the final ones and
There
read
you
them.
go.
I wasn't here, so I wouldn't
Yes.
know yes or no.
It was a good meeting. All right. Okay. All right. Well, with that in mind, do I have a motion?
I make a motion
I'll
we
make the
approve the
motion.
minutes.
Tom Farrell? Tom,
Yes,
make a motion?
I do.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you. Got a motion? We have a second?
I second.
All right, okay. A motion and a second. All in favor of accepting
Well,
the,
is the person who wanted the changes made happy with the changes that were made?
yes, I saw an email to that effect. She
Okay.
thanked Desiree for making the changes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay? Good, all right, so,
All in favor?
all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, ayes carry. We'll move along to the regular agenda. Before we get into that, actually, I think what I want to do is move regular agenda item number 7 up to right now. There's a couple of things that I want to cover before we get into the meat of today's. First off, I want to apologize if anybody is here to talk about trees and/or lighting, because given the weight of what we're trying to get through this evening, I don't think we're going to have time to do those. So they are listed on the agenda, but we're not going to do anything, we're not planning to do anything with those now. The other thing is, we're looking to have a training session for planning and zoning on the 10th of July. And it will have to do with what the responsibilities and roles of planning and zoning are. And frankly, a lot of what it is we do here fall into some of those same categories. So I'd like you to pencil it in on your agendas, on your calendars, to see if you can see your way to make that training as well. I'm also going to make this recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. But I took this training a couple of months ago. I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure the P&Z will get a lot out of it, and I think that everybody here at this meeting would get something out of it. There are a lot of tools that we probably don't fully understand.
What's that date?
That would be July 10th.
Okay.
Do you have a time and place?
It would be here, it would be during the normal, regular P&Z meeting, which generally start at 6 o'clock. We're putting this P&Z meeting, we're planning to put this P&Z meeting back 1 week because the regular meeting would have been the 3rd of July, which it has difficulties around it. So right now, it's not settled, but I'd like you to think about keeping the space open if you can do that.
Here?
Yeah. And what else? Okay, yeah, is there anybody who has anything that they would like to speak about as far as possible future meeting dates or agenda topics for discussion? Okay, then I'll close that item.
We probably ought to do a little informal calendar to
Yeah.
figure out who's gonna be here when. Like, I was absent for a couple of weeks and visiting grandchildren in Europe, and if we're gonna be really short of a quorum, that would be obviously something very significant, but even if we're gonna have 2 or 3 people missing and we had a quorum, a bare quorum, maybe we ought not to meet with just a bare quorum.
Yeah.
I won't be here June 11th, if there's another meeting.
I'm gone that week as well. June 11th.
You're out?
I'm not available, correct.
Okay,
I'm gone June
all right.
You just made that up.
11th.
No, yeah, we've actually been
I'm
talking
kidding.
about it.
We got both of our architects out at the same time, we're gonna be hurt.
All right, we may. Tom, are you gonna be around on June 11th?
As far as I know, I have high hopes of it.
Okay.
Do you know something I don't know,
No, I
Dave?
do not, I do not.
You're good.
Thank you, you're good, yeah. Jay, do you believe you'll be here?
I'll be here. as of now.
Okay. I will be here. You're not, okay. Will you be here, Brian?
I'll be here, I'll be out the last 2 weeks of July is the only time that
All
I'm
right.
gonna be gone the rest of the summer, as far as I know.
Okay. So we do have, that would put us at 4.
Could do lighting and trees.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to what Brian is saying, that, you know, do you want just a bare quorum? Now, you know, we can still kick around. Well, Jay is the lead on the trees subcommittee.
I mean, I will have something to present at that meeting.
You will have
for
something.
the CRCRC as a
Right,
whole.
okay, all right.
You're talking about the June 11 meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Tell you what, let's plan to do
You're
it.
here out June 11?
Let's plan to have our meeting, and then
And,
if
Jay is out June 11?
I'm sorry?
Excuse me, is Jay out June
Jeff,
11th? Sunday?
I'm out June 11th, correct?
Yeah, Jeff is out.
And Duke?
Duke is out,
Gone.
yes. Yes. So that means
Okay, so-
but we still have 4. Okay?
All right?
You, Jay, myself, and Tom. All right? And if Tom needs to be on Zoom, this committee is allowed to constitute a quorum with the Zoom contributor. So, I say we have the meeting, and if we decide at some point that we don't have enough folks there to make a decision, we can call it then.
Okay.
All right?
I think I just wanted us to go knowingly into the unknown of vacations and
Yeah.
interruptions caused by vacations.
Yeah, I get it. My intention is to be here through the next city council meeting, and then I take off for a couple of weeks. So at the end of June, I won't be available. So the 25th, I'll be out. And how will we be?
I'll be here.
You'll be back, Jeff?
25th of July, I'll be here.
No, of June.
June.
June
yeah.
25.
You'll still be, okay, good.
I'll be here.
You'll be here? You may be, okay. How about you, Brian?
I should be here.
Okay, and Tom?
Far as I know.
Okay,
Who's
good.
our vice chair? Who's our vice president? Alex?
Alex is. Okay.
Mm.
It's, and there's a high probability I will not be here,
There's a high probability you will not. Okay?
but let the show go on without me.
Yeah.
We'll just have to elect a chair.
We
De
need
facto.
to do that. We'll need to do
On
that.
the- on the day.
Would you take that, Brian?
What's the pay? You have to
Double what you're getting
double what I'm
today.
getting
Double
now.
what you're getting today.
I
All right?
demand double my salary for this. I will do it if I have to, yes.
All right, thank you. Very good. All right. Well, then, do we need to take a motion on that? We do not. Okay.
No.
It's decided, we'll just do it that way, okay? Very good. Then, is there anything else that we want to consider for future topics or discussion? We good? All right. Okay, we're off of item 7. Let's go back to item number 3, discussion and possible action regarding building height recommendations following the April 17th, 2024 City Council meeting, building height discussion. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak with regard to this?
I have 2 that signed up, Amy Padilla will be first.
Okay. Amy?
I would like to hear the presentation, in the same way, would it be possible to hear the presentation on the new proposal first?
Well, I think typically we allow for public input prior to the presentation, but we could do it.
It can be at any time.
I'm sorry?
It can be at any time.
Okay. Alex, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, bye.
Okay, so I think, from the last meeting, when you guys were all here and spoke, we, went back to the table and we sat down and we talked through, we considered all the things that you guys brought forward. And I think that our finding is still that the parallel plane is generally considered the most effective at controlling building height on slope while still allowing for reasonable development. We've continued to look at projects in Rollingwood that have been built under our current rules that still work within this parallel plane. We compared it to some of the suggestions that came forward, which is what this graphic is. I just threw this together. Can't verify its accuracy. It's kind of how I interpreted it. but the thing that the parallel plane does is it controls consistently for overall height, going down a slope, while still allowing people to build whatever shape house they want. The other proposals, the reason that the average grade or the average of corners, which was on our survey, I think that the reason most people didn't select that is because it doesn't actually control for height. It still allows for a certain amount of height above and below 35 feet. I think that what we did was we looked at, and I think Duke, can you explain kind of how we came to the 18% slope number that is kind of how we're defining steeply sloping, which we thought was kind of a good model for allowing back in some additional height up to the 45 feet if you have an 18% slope, which guarantees that that height will be on the downslope with additional controls on the sides, although they are slightly more generous than the general case. It gives you an extra 5 feet just to account for that slope. And again, vetting it against projects that have been built currently. I think we had the graphic last week, and it's also in the packet. It's just an outline of a house on Vale. Sorry, Riley. That currently, under Rolling Woods rules, it actually, I think it has more than 18% slope, and it actually follows the parallel plane just by its design. And that is kind of what we're noticing about the parallel plane, is that kind of good design that takes into account a slope tends to fall within this umbrella. There's a home right over here on a corner, pretty steeply sloping as you go up Park Hills. It's beautiful. You know, I tested that house. It's also falls within the parallel plane, just because it's gracious about how it builds on the site. So within that, those parameters, we still have some restrictions, like on the front setback, which is an area of concern for people. So it requires, you can't build up to 45 feet on a front setback. That piece has to be set back an additional 45, well, a total of 45 feet from the front setback property line, excuse me. Then the side setbacks are still taken into account. I want to back up and go back to the bulk planes. I think that I would like to suggest one amendment to what we have here. It says that it's measured from finished grade. I think that it should be existing or finished grade, whichever is lower, because I think that finished grade could come up significantly, which would negate the restriction along the 10-foot setback. And I feel fairly confident, having looked at this, that 25 feet is very generous for a side setback on the 10-foot setback. And I think that that needs to be protected, because I think that you can still build within that quite comfortably. So, just a second.
Good. There's more.
I'll say real quickly how
Yeah.
the reason, and I assume you all have read the notes. I probably don't need to go over those, but we like the idea of using slope over feet, because it's actually sort of takes away the gaming option, and it's a more accurate reflection of what that site looks like, because you could easily say, oh, well, I have a lot of slope. I have 10 foot of change, but that could just be at one corner of your property. This takes into account the whole property. And similarly, the parallel plane is really protecting that airspace of the whole property. It's not how you design, it's not how you measure height, it's how you protect what your neighbors have come to know as kind of their greater context of what's around their house. And so they can know that they can look over at a lot that might be developed next to them and know that nothing's really gonna be above 35 feet, and that there's gonna be some protections along the setbacks for anything that is
Along
developed.
the setback line.
Yeah. So, I Or
Hmm.
what else do I need? What am I missing? I don't know if you wanna talk about the 18% or not. We don't have to.
Could you say a word about the 18%, how we got to that?
Boy, I went back in my notes and tried to find the exact, 18% was, an intuitive feel in the end. Somewhere above 5 feet additional and 10 feet. I think
Mhm.
it turned out to 6.2 or 6.3,
Mm-hmm.
given a conventional conventional lots in Rollingwood are hard to describe, but there's a majority that are 150 to 140 feet deep, so.
And we were seeing numbers between 16 and 20% in some of the codes in other cities, so I think we kind of split the difference
Yeah.
based on kind of what we were seeing.
We had a really good mathematical reason for that, and I can't find it. And I couldn't go backwards.
Do you want to say anything about these examples that you have here in the packet?
Oh, yeah. I don't have my little building on
Is
the
it
hillside.
useful?
This guy.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah. You want to talk about that or what?
yeah, we can do that. I have to pull mine up though. Sorry. So, yeah, the very first photo, number 1, is that house I mentioned that's been built. By my estimations, and just to back up, the reason we're having to use photos, this comment has come up, is because we have to. We can't really use drawings without shielding them in some way, and so it makes it pretty challenging. I have to take the drawings and then put them on a photo because a photo is something you can publicly go get, in most cases. So, and this one is, a loose interpretation. The drawing below it, I actually traced. The high point you can't really see in that photo. It's set back. That 45-foot horizontal plane is actually further in the distance. So this is more of a representation, because I don't have a drone or whatever. But I think that what that house did, if you look at the roof slope in the second image, it actually quite literally follows the slope, also known as parallel plane. And because it is facing a wooded area and it's facing away from the street, it is one of those instances that would be granted additional height forgiveness. The one below that, I don't know, number 3.
Can we scroll the,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one too. A lot of these homes, I've noticed they use the quote 10-foot bonus, but they don't actually need it with the parallel plane because they do the right thing in the way they build down the slope, and they're not giving up anything. I mean, when you're built,
That's 5 you have on the
yeah, I
screen.
think
Yeah,
it's
I
up
think-
1, number 3.
Yeah.
When you're buying a sloped lot, you're buying a sloped lot. You're not buying a flat lot. And I think that working with the topography is an asset. It gives a lot of variability. It allows you height and breeze and various things. So I think that's why a lot of people choose them, is because of the interest that they provide. So again, here, this house, it shows the Rollingwood max height is that dashed yellow line, but the parallel plane would actually allow you a little bit more going up should you need it. But what the parallel plane does is at some point it kind of says, okay, it's time to step this volume down and not have something egregiously tall because you had a horizontal plane. That's what we have now. And again, most people do kind of what I call the right thing. And so this parallel plane isn't going to affect 95% of people or more. But it is trapping out, it's cutting off the top of some of these homes that are getting a little too tall. By my estimation, that house that's going up number 4, You know, to me, I think that it falls within, this rule. I don't actually know the grade of it, but it does face a wooded area, it does feel pretty steep, and it steps its volumes up the hillside. Number 5, that is less than an 18% slope, so it wouldn't be granted additional, but I wanted to use it as an example of how you can't have something above 35 feet facing the street. And if you do with the exception, you still can't do that. If that was an 18% slope, you cannot have a volume like that facing the street. Number 6 is one I brought up last week. It was brought up to me. Someone was concerned that it couldn't be built, but it would actually have a little bit of additional allowance. It used the 10-foot exception, but it didn't actually need it. Let's see, number 7. So this, I wanted to show that wall, it's been talked about as being pretty tall, but it's actually just under 20 feet. What we're suggesting, and it turns out I thought it was a 10-foot setback, but it's 15. But if we pretend it's a 10-foot setback, the CRC is saying you can actually add an additional 5 feet than what you're seeing here, up to a 25-foot wall. But the truth is, in this particular case, you could go to 30 feet. But that is less than what is currently allowed with Rollingwood, which would allow you to go up to 35, that yellow line, and possibly 45 if you had 10 feet of change. Number 8. Thank you, Nikki. A lot of people have mentioned this house as being, you know, unusually tall, and I don't know how tall that trash can is, probably 3 feet, 4 feet, I'm sure we could measure it. But the 21 feet is what came off the drawings. So again, I'm guessing that's about 25-foot max, which is just showing you that's a lot of wall. So if we're restricting the 10-foot setback to 25 feet, you can get a very generous 2-story house in that dimension.
Can you reveal that location?
I don't know.
It's on
Okay.
Timberline, isn't it?
No, I can't.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay, next. So
It is in Rollingwood, though.
it is in Rollingwood. So this one is also currently it's on a 20-foot setback. That wall is 29 feet, but we're actually saying under our current rules that you can go to 35 feet at a 20-foot setback. I personally think that's too tall. I would like to see more restriction on that, but that's, you know, where we are. I'll leave that up for debate. But that's also to say that, you know, somebody is building a sizable house under our current rules, and we're not saying you can't still do that. Next one is just showing that wall would be compliant. It's 25 feet on a 10-foot setback. And then the last 2 are, we're suggesting that you take kind of that top portion off, that it only goes up to 30 feet so that you don't have, if you'll go to the last photo, kind of a disconnect between a sizable house next to a smaller residence. Can be pretty impactful. And also that volume I'm not exactly sure if that volume projects out over the setback line, but I think it's a case of when it does, that should be controlled.
Yeah,
So
this here.
Overhead?
Yeah,
So,
you know where this is?
that's it.
Do I know where that
Yeah, it's G.
is? Yeah.
All right,
I'm done.
okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Alex on all this? Okay.
Um,
Tom, do you have something you want to say?
Yes. Alex, let me ask you a couple things. So I know y'all went through this and tried to address or look at it from standpoint of the comments that Ryan and that made, but we didn't address Amy's issues about the floodplain on here. And I would suggest on that one that we kind of we make a note of that we're going to be looking at the height, but include that when we go through the drainage and the that we have to do. We haven't done that one yet.
Hey, Tom, if you'll look at item number or point number 7 at the base of the presentation, there is some public interest in allowing houses built alongside a drainage easement, some additional height consideration. The CRCRC will look at this when it gets to its drainage and pervious cover work.
Right. And I think that's probably the appropriate way to respond to that. So I agree with that. How have we done, Alex? I know you looked at this from a standpoint of if we have first of all, how many? What do y'all estimate the number of lots that we have, Duke, that has a 18 or greater slope in Rollingwood? 10%, 5%?
I'm gonna think, probably between 10 and 15%.
Okay. So let me just ask you, would it be appropriate to have a separate measurement scale for that section of that? And that's just for my question. It's not something, position I'm taking, but is that something that we would consider doing?
I think that's what we have done, Tom. I think what we've got with the presentation here is we've got the general case, which considers pretty much most of the lots in Rollingwood and those that are effectively less than an 18% slope. We believe that that's probably amounts to about, say, 85 or 90% of the lots here in Rollingwood. And now we've taken the 18% rule and put it in place and have come up with accommodations to allow some additional height as needed if the lots are severely sloped. So there really are there's two pieces here. There's the general case and then the 10%, 15%
Right.
case.
Yeah, I got that part of it, Dave. And I guess my question was, is that going to address these issues that were brought up at our last meeting? And I guess we could ask the people that brought that up at the first time, brought it up last meeting, whether that addresses their concerns.
Well, that was the intent, but yeah, I look forward to getting some feedback on that.
Okay.
Well, hold on. Are we gonna call folks up? Is that what the process will be, or
We're
what?
gonna try to call people in order if you signed up.
Even in an open forum discussion, I'm not trying to give a presentation.
That's up to the chair. how
Okay,
you'd like to.
all right. Well, if you have something, yeah, if you wanna speak to this, go. Sure.
I think that's where I am, Dave. I want to make sure that we've addressed their concerns.
That's fair, okay.
Yeah, Jeff Ezel, 4709 Timberline. I do not think it addresses the concern. I think Duke's estimated lot depth of 140 to 150 feet is probably a decent average. But
Pretty typical on Timberline in
yeah,
particular.
assuming it's 0.4 acres, some of the smaller ones are a little shallower, 120 depending on the width.
Typical.
But I think that's right. You got 30-foot front setback, 20-foot back setback. So there's 50 feet you take out of it. You have 100 feet of buildable space left. That means you have to have 18 feet of change within the buildable area to have an 18% slope. That is not. If we have 450 homes, 15%, that's, 10 would be 445, 15 would be 60. We do not have 60 homes that are captured under that mechanism. I believe that we need to have something that is more gracious for people with the average slope change, which is probably closer to 5 to 10%. And so I would say that that relief tool that has been created does not address the problems for such a topographically diverse area as the city of Rollingwood. And it probably needs to come down, and we need to think about how we don't impact so many homes.
Do you
So,
have some
Jeff, how would
specific
you,
examples of homes? Because I've looked at a lot, and I'm not seeing very many. So if you want to share with me which homes would be impacted, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay?
Yeah. I mean, there's one that you just showed. It may have worked on the setbacks, but it didn't work on the height.
Which one?
I think it was your number 7, the house at 404 Farley, which had the address change. So it's little things like that where we pick up what I think is right, and that is the tinting is something that the residents have shown that they want, and it does actually benefit the adjacent neighbors. But then there's the adverse impact even on a slowly sloping lot like that one where it does not qualify anymore.
So I don't think 1.5 feet is a big impact. I mean,
Says the person who spent $150,000 on that architecturally, and they're trying to get it through now, and then it
Yeah.
goes away.
yeah. Well, this is a house under construction. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, it's an approved plan.
True, but here's the thing that y'all have to think about. The time to buy a lot and get it to permitting I've done it, 18 months. I mean, what do you do if you're 18 months and then this comes out?
I've done it myself too, and it didn't take me 18 months. I think I got it done in 2.
Well, Dave, I don't know what to say. I mean,
Right.
that's your example. I'm giving you other examples of how long
Right,
it took
yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I think the question was asked, does the relief tool that was created with an 18% slope fix what the concerns are from the residents? I would tell you no.
Well,
Okay.
it's debatable how people would view this house as either maybe it's too tall, or maybe some would say it's not tall enough. But it's trying to thread that needle, and it's a very minor tweak. And maybe there's something that the city can do to accommodate people that are at the stage that you're talking about in their drawings that, I don't know, maybe that can be worked with, so.
Jeff?
I don't
Uh,
think it'd be anybody's intent to catch somebody halfway through the process, and I hope we'd consider that.
Yeah, you could phase it in. You could find a way to put it for a future date or something, give people enough
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
We have gone through and looked at what the impact of our proposed changes would do to recent builds, and have found that almost none of them would be impacted at all. Everything works the same way. And it's because, to a large extent, the architects who had built these houses had taken the slope into effect and designed the house around the slope as opposed to trying to design the slope around the house. You can look at these things, you can say, I want to put a big box anywhere. And if I put that big box over here, that means one of these walls is going to be higher than what the maximum allowable height is going to be. But if it's on a different place, it won't be, because the slope of the lot will accommodate that big box now. Now, if we say that we can take any house and we can put it anywhere in Rollingwood, that's not what the public wants. They want the houses to fit the lot, not the lot to fit the house.
Dave?
Jeff, I don't have
Jeff,
any problem with
I have a question for Jeff, if I still could on that. Jeff, what would you change on this? That's really where I'm trying to get to.
I would probably think about average measurements. I would also look at other successful neighborhoods. Some people may disagree, but the average around the country is you do see averages. You look at average slope, you look to the average of the highest roof. That's what they do in Austin. I know people say that may be terrible, but they have tinting. It works. They do the slope measurement. I mean, what we are trying to do is create relief, but not be punitive. That is my opinion. Relief, but not punitive. Now, if you really want to know what I would recommend, which I'm sure this would fall on deaf ears, specifically as the survey did not support this, right now what is being proposed adversely impacts people with topographical change. It does not impact every resident. It does not impact every resident. When we issue a bond, do we say that the people with odd addresses pay for it, but the people with even addresses get the benefit of it? No. Every person gets to pay for it and the benefit. Lower the height across the board on every single lot to 30 feet and leave relief for people with topographical change. Then we'll find out what the city really believes, because everyone's impacted. Right now, what we have done is we have created a path where we are picking winners and losers, and not everybody is impacted. And that is what is very difficult, because those of us who are trying to represent what we believe are the topographical challenged lots don't see it impacting half of the community.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with you. I think that the average is more punitive, because when you take an average, you're gonna wind up with something that's shorter on one side and taller on the other. As opposed to the parallel plane, you're granted more height. That's what the graphics all show. So just because you say it's more punitive doesn't make it true. It's, the parallel plane shows you that you have more height. You're starting with more height. But when you use an average, you're gonna be lower somewhere.
That's mathematically incorrect. I mean, all you do is you take a high point, let's say it's 10, and a low point, and let's say it's 0. You make your reference datum 5. You go 35 feet up from that.
No, you have to take it from the average. And so,
10 plus 0 is
Okay.
10, divided by 2 is 5. So you build
but
up
if
from.
you have a slope, on the uphill slope, you're gonna have something shorter.
I just explained it. Your high point is 10 feet, your low point is 0. You divide those by 2, it's 5. You build 35 feet up from 5.
Okay, but on your 10-point high point, you won't have 35 feet.
Correct.
Okay, that's punitive. And you can have
That's
35
way
feet
less
with
punitive.
a parallel plane.
It's just, listen, in the example that you just gave, parallel plane, it's 35 feet at your high point, okay? At your low point, it has to come down equal amount, right? So it's technically, over here it's 45, over here it's 35, okay?
Okay, well, if
In the
you,
average, it's 40 across, so people can have flat first floors.
if you wanna build a house that looks like that, then yeah, you're gonna be penalized by a parallel plane.
That's
But
right.
if you wanna build a house that actually kinda elegantly follows the grade
But
and
who-
doesn't have to step down and have, you know, baby gates everywhere, like nobody has that. Nobody's doing that.
This is what has struggled too, is this now becomes an architectural preference versus allowing people property rights to build flat first floors.
These are,
You know,
I'm trying to show the finished floor on a lot of the examples that
Look,
are not stepping
I
down.
yeah.
Jeff, this is Tom. I've got one other question for Jeff.
Yes, sir.
One of the concerns I've had on averaging is that, for instance, a lot that I'm very familiar with on Park Hills had a draw or creek, which would have been which was their low point.
Correct.
So their average on that would be impacted by just a 4-foot wide low area that flowed through there. And then they had a area on the other side of the lot that extended up about 5 feet. So the average would have been if you took the average, just those two numbers, you'd get a totally different type of thing. And if I've been following Alex, which I've really tried to do that, and I appreciate everything that Alex has done on this, because she has really worked, and they do this for a living, and it's hard for me not to follow that, but if we did those as an average on those type of lots, you would end up with a number that had totally no basis for what we would be looking at. And that's presented us with some of the issues we've had in Rollingwood. Now, believe it or not, and I'll go back one more point with you, there was a time in Rollingwood when our height limit was 30 feet. And we went from 30 to 35, and we've gone through, and I think I went through this with you last time, there's been about 3 times that we've tried to determine how we get the data from a standpoint of where you start that 35 feet from. And one of those was an average of across the board. And it turned out to be problematic as we went through. There were some problems with it because of the topography changes that we have, sharp topography changes on some of the lots. So, I mean, I appreciate that we've got, and maybe we can do this from a standpoint of, if you have those type of issues, we're not trying to be punitive on that. We have relief that's coming in from a standpoint of not only Board of Adjustment, but from special exemptions that come in. And I think that is maybe a way for where you have certain topography issues that might come in. And that may be something we look at, that you get relief. Because it's not going to be, coming up with an average lot in Rollingwood is just, we can't do it. So you have to have a basis that we start with. And I think that Alex has done a good job on coming up with that. But I do appreciate the fact that we've got sloped lots that we have to deal with on a special case.
Jeff, how do you deal with the fact that you've got more than one axis to deal with?
Exactly.
We're speaking as if the lot is either sloping down to the street or up from the street. In fact, the lots are sideways as well. So do we need to average that into this calculus of how we would do things under your proposal of averages?
Well, Duke, you've built in the city of Austin. How do they do their average slope?
You know what? I haven't done a house in Austin.
I mean, here's the deal, guys.
I mean, you know what, Jeff? I have to take the McMansion ordinance out and reread it every time.
I know.
It's complex.
It's tough. 32 feet. I get it. Floodplains up to 35 feet. They're looking up to the average of the highest roof point. So, like, the thing that I'm also, like, these rules exist. They're working fine. It's not perfect. But when we reinvent this, to your same point, is we're going to have that on parallel plane. So on a parallel plane, are we going to have houses that are leaning back and sloping down? Because it's not just, parallel plane doesn't just go one way. It has the same topographical challenges you just brought up. But now it even becomes more complex than an average, because at least an average you can work around it. So it's actually heightened.
But you're talking about 2 averages, aren't you now?
I'm not writing the code. I'm just telling you this is the way it's done in a lot of places. That's all I'm giving you as an example. I was asked what could an alternative methodology be. I presented 2 averages: average slope, average roof. When you go to the highest point of when you go to the average of the roof, then if you do that, if you have a sloped roof, you go to the average of that, so it doesn't get adversely impacted for having for a slope. But if it's a flat roof, it's just that roof. And so again, a lot of what we feel are the imposing homes that sit directly on a neighbor. If you look back through all those that were given, I bet 70% of them were flat roofs on a neighbor's property line or on the street. And that is also something that taking the average height from the highest roof helps fix.
But if you have a very steeply sloping, roof, your average point could be high enough that you're gonna go well above.
You could. Part of that's
Right.
architectural, and you could put a cap on a 10-foot roof or a certain slope pitch, 4 and 12.
And you're
We
starting
don't,
to get
we don't need a
complicated.
12-to-1 roof for snow, for snow
Exactly.
removal, you know?
So,
But, stay there. Look, what we're trying to do is people, or at least what I'm trying to do, not architect, people have griped about some of the aspects of some of the homes and said, we don't want that. All right? They don't have the vocabulary, and I'm not sure that I do either, to express exactly why they don't like that, but they don't like that. And part of it was what you just said, the imposition of some real tall thing next to somebody else's house that it just, and it just out of scale.
right.
Well, okay, how do you say to a citizen, you're right, we don't like that. Now, what do we do? Do we do a code for each lot? Do we do a code that, for a different one for lots that slope back to front versus front to back versus side to side? The complexity of it gets to be very difficult to manage. And as Tom just said, we've had, my house was old enough that we built under a 30-foot rule. And my wife still bitches about the fact that we've got only 8-foot ceilings or 9-foot ceilings in our second story. So we've tried.
She just comments, Brian. She doesn't,
What, Tom?
she just makes comments about it.
Oh. Okay. I will recharacterize my statement then. I hear continuing comments about the fact that the roofs, that our ceiling in the second floor is not tall enough. The fact that we've had 3 or 4 different rules in the time that I've been here, trying to figure out what it is that we like or don't like. As a citizenry, we get to say that.
Right.
That's what zoning's about. That's what building codes are about, and that's what we're about, is trying to articulate what it is we like and what it is we don't like about some of the things that we're seeing built. And I appreciate your input about the averages. I need to consider it, but I think that when you start talking about the differences between front to back, back to front, side to side, I don't know how we do that.
Well, just remember, it's going to be exacerbated on parallel plane.
Actually, parallel plane is really, you can assess it from the side that shows the highest to the lowest point. It's meaningless when the grade is largely the same on either end.
Then you could do that for average measurement.
Okay, and so you might have to look at it from the 2 sides that show the greatest slope.
That's a
and
great
that's
idea.
it.
We'll
Yeah.
do that then.
I think
Average
I want
measurement.
to take some exception to the comment that people are in favor of adopting the Austin ordinance rules dealing with McMansion. That they're happy. I don't think Austin residents are happy with the McMansion ordinance.
Correct, but they have other issues such as 5-foot setbacks that are making that tougher. The tenting becomes a little tougher because they don't have setbacks. They get really steep roofs. I mean, they have issues. I'm not saying that they don't. My example is just that rules exist that are not so punitive with topographical change, because what they're trying to do is take into consideration that a certain lot may have a challenge that a flat may not, but they shouldn't just get treated as a second, class citizen.
I'm still having trouble understanding why there's such a pushback on something when we are proposing something that would have almost no impact on all the houses that have been built in the past 10 years. What we've tried to do is to be careful so as to not be punitive, except in the extreme cases. And we know what those extreme cases are. And in fact, what's being proposed would, had they been in place at the time, those extreme cases wouldn't be extreme.
Yeah.
And everything else that was built would have been just fine. So
Can you please share that analysis? Because I think that's part of the struggle.
Here's our issue, and I've been
Okay.
asked about this in the past couple of weeks,
Uh-huh.
particularly since the last meeting.
Okay.
Is that how do we know that what we're doing is that everything else that has been built in the past 10 years would be in compliance with what it is we're proposing? And the way that we do it is that we look at approved building plans that are here on file with the city, and we compare what it is we're proposing with those plans. Now, we're not allowed to bring those plans out and show you that. We're not allowed. We have guidance from our legal counsel that says it's proprietary information, there are property rights involved, and you can look at these things. Anybody here in this room is allowed to put a request in to look at those same plans. We've done it. So we know it's right, but we're not allowed to illustrate it or do things with it. And for good cause, but
So you're saying you aren't allowed to publish them, but you're allowed to share them?
in the way that we work here, everything we share gets posted on this website.
No, y'all aren't following the Open Meetings Act.
I'm sorry?
You don't have to follow the Open Meetings Act.
I do have to follow the Open Meetings Act.
Where did this whole discussion come from about all this? I've watched every video. It's
Yeah,
all happening offline.
we do that in subcommittee.
So I could come to a subcommittee and all that analysis can be shared?
I suppose that's right. Yeah, I guess that would, if there was something to say. Now, we don't have anything pictorially to share.
But you would have the elevations, you could show me empirically the data.
No,
that
I think what we could do is gather around a computer here in the city hall here,
Yeah, we're
and then
making
look at it.
progress.
Could do that.
Okay. Well, I don't want to hog this. I think others wanted to bring up some data points that may have been around this. I kind of jumped in there as first. But if
I
you
do want to mention one house that I looked at today with Nikki. I don't know that I can say the address, but, which is unfortunate because it's a house that's built on a very steep slope. It's a beautiful home, downtown view. I don't know how much more I can say, but the front of the house drops kind of precipitously into a drainage. And we looked at it. They used the 45-foot, max, and we tested it with the parallel plane, and it's totally compliant because of the way the house was built, which is beautiful. It was a good architect, same architect that has built some of your homes in the audience, and they do the right thing. It's not punitive. If you want to build something that's egregious and that's going to impact your neighbors and cause people to complain, then I guess that might be a definition of punitive.
I do want to add one point to be clear. I'm in agreement. I know what homes we're talking about.
Mhm.
They're painful. It's not fair to the neighbors. It's not fair from the curb appeal. And I'm in agreement. We need to fix these problems.
Yep.
I just think there's a less punitive way to go about it. That's all I have to say. So I appreciate, and I'm going to say this again just since I'm on the record.
And that's
Thank y'all.
that's a fair comment, and I appreciate that we agree on the problem, we just don't agree on the solution. That's true in an awful lot of issues that we have in our society right now, I think. But, okay, I appreciate your input.
Yeah, well, thank you. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate y'all. Again, I do disagree with you. I think that's clear, but I know it's hard. I know you're looking for a solution for the neighborhood that's just different than mine. I just think my idea is better.
Let me, Dave, I have one other comment that I'd like to do if I could.
Yes, by all means, go ahead.
I know I've talked to Alex about this before, but I wanted to just make sure, Jeff, one of the things that you'd mentioned was you were concerned that a parallel plane would cause the architectural design of more flat roofs as opposed to gable roofs. And I wanted to just for the record, get our comments on that, Alex and Duke, as to whether or not they felt like that would be a problem.
I can only answer that, Tom, intuitively. I totally disagree, Jeff, And again, I'm thinking about, let's say I built 4 houses in this neighborhood. 2 of them for sure were 18% or more. And again, I know you use the 15% to say there's probably not 60 lots, but there might easily be 40, 45. You know, I mean, Timberline has a significant number of them. But, you know, this would discourage architects to want to work in Rollingwood? That is a joke. They would be challenged to work in Rollingwood.
What
Okay?
it also said is it could cost increased cost because they're coming up and understanding new
Well,
rules
guess what?
at every
You can
time.
always find somebody cheaper. You know,
Not the good ones, not the good
you
ones.
can always find somebody cheaper.
That's how you get these homes, Duke.
Well, I'm
But-
just telling you.
That's how you
you're-
get those homes.
You're talking about price shouldn't be an issue,
You know,
okay?
one last thing to this, Tom, because it is a good point. I think you wanted Alex. There was a gentleman who lives in the neighborhood came to city council and spoke that his expectation is that you're also going to see what you see in Westlake Hills, which is more flat roofs. Am I saying other people are going to have potentially a different opinion? Yeah, architecturally it could, but other people may, because they don't want to give up their airspace for a attic, move towards it. That's just the way it is. 'Cause
I mean, again, that's all about style and
correct. Agreed.
you know, what people are intrigued by and has probably very little to do with the geometry of it.
If you'll read my comment, though, I didn't say it's unilaterally going to push it. I qualified it.
Okay.
Well, the reason Westlake, I think that was the example cited, uses a lot of flat roofs on hillsides is because that's the aesthetic that people are after. They don't want to stand out on the hillside. They like to blend in, and it's fairly commonplace. But since we have so many examples right now in Rollingwood of all houses, old and new, modern, traditional, that fit within this model, I just don't think you can say people are gonna have flat roofs, that it's going to discourage architecture, because there are so many high-quality architects on my list of homes I've looked at that are on steeply sloping lots, maybe not 18%, some are more, some are less, that have built whatever the house they dreamed of and still could. And so I can't keep having this, I mean, I know that's your opinion and I'll let you have it, but I can't agree when you state it as fact.
Well, if y'all will share your analysis, I think a lot of this can be put to bed. So far, to date, nothing has been shared. In drawings like that,
Yeah,
You don't think that's sharing?
Yeah, you don't,
no, because I
Why
know,
not?
because I know some of those measurements are wrong. Because
Oh.
I've done my own analysis.
Okay.
Well, share it with me.
I will.
What's wrong?
I will.
I mean, I think again, Alex has done most of that work. I think it's a pretty good effort to try to give you as good analysis as we're capable of doing.
Yeah.
The
There's always-
problem with as capable as we're doing, this has severe impact to people. I believe it does. And I don't want as capable as we're willing to do. If we're gonna make a material change like this,
It's all we can do at this point.
Well, I've got, let me ask you, Jeff, I look at this and I'm just not seeing this great change from, I mean, I think we're making some change, but this isn't a major change as far as I can see, unless I'm missing something.
let me do this. I think my voice is getting a little old. Would anybody else like to
well,
chime
You're,
in?
you're raising issues that need to be talked about, Jeff. That's why we're keeping you up there. Let me ask this. My experience in building has been entirely commercial. And I have represented people over 50 years now building shopping centers and office buildings and other things, warehouses with flat roofs. And there's one rule I've come up with, and that they all leak.
Correct. Shorter lifespans, more expensive, 20-year roofs, you don't get the drainage. I totally agree. It's a more expensive construction
And to
cost.
me, that has some impact on the issue of whether or not people will go for flat roofs, whether we like it or not. But I wouldn't have a flat roof.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
But that's why I would be impacted, because I would choose a more traditional house with a sloped roof. And if now all of a sudden, for example, that one that we showed, it was only 1.5 feet, and you may say, well, you can work around that. Well, that may be true, but what if what we find is 40 of the newly home builts were within 2 feet. Doesn't that tell me, it tells me what we shouldn't have done has been so harsh on a 35 foot and maybe done an average measurement and picked up 3 to 5 feet of variability and captured all of these ones on the fringes versus saying no.
We have not found that the homes that have been built so far have exceeded the maximum,
No.
okay? What we are finding, though, is that they're taking advantage of a 10-foot rule to achieve a 45-foot wall. Okay, and you want to talk about winners and losers. The loser is the person who's on the other side of that 45-foot wall.
I understand. And I have
Okay.
one next to me.
Yeah.
I get it.
So what we're trying to do, and not trying, what we've done, is created a proposal that eliminates that in almost every case. So that you can't do these, you can't do this terrible 45-foot wall to your neighbor. You can do something else. Now, when we're talking about maximums, it's only, I live in a single-story house. I don't come anywhere near 35 feet, you know? I like the house, it's plenty big enough for us. If we had kids, we'd be able to raise them there. But we're not, I don't feel that what we're proposing
Have you
with our,
talked to Claire about that?
what we're proposing is the maximum that's allowable. It's not, you know, that you have to build a house a particular way. These are the maximum values that you're allowed to use in a house, which is, in this place, it's fairly generous.
So if there was a data set that showed it did impact more than a fringe number, would this
Well, what
change
would a
your
fringe
mind?
be?
I'll use your numbers. What do you think a fringe would be?
Well, we are, as I say, I think that we focused on the outliers, the ones that you know about. I don't think it really affect hardly anything else besides that.
Okay.
Whatever that percentage is, and it may only be 2% for all I know. But
All right.
Half a dozen houses.
yeah, that's right. We're talking exactly that. You know, and to some extent, you think about this. In the areas that seem to be wanting to be impacted by all this, the build-out has already happened. You know, all along Timberline, a lot of the houses have already been replaced or have had building permits approved. The impact on anybody is going to be pretty small.
So you just picked the losers, those who haven't built yet.
No, I don't think that's right.
Let me,
You're assuming.
Yeah.
Dave, let me make sure I understood one thing on this.
Yeah.
If I remember looking at all this, none of the houses that had slopes would be adversely affected by this, I don't believe. It was the ones that didn't have such slopes that got that 45 foot, that extra 10 feet. Is that right, or am I off some? I might be off on that. I'm gonna say one thing, and I'll finish with this, and I apologize to spend so much time, but Jeff, I gotta tell you, we've of all the times we've gone through determining how we derive height in Rollingwood, this has been the most detailed and professional effort we've ever made. I'll just tell you that.
Okay.
And I totally agree, and I wasn't around past time, but at no point in the history of Rollingwood has it been this complex. The last time this happened, everybody was on septic. They had limitations to how big their fields had to be, how big. So, like, there were other limiting factors at play that, again, are not existent now, which is pushing to larger homes, which is there's more wealth, this neighborhood is the value of the lot has gone up so much that people would like more on their lots, and they should be able to do that on a sloped lot similarly that they can on a flat lot. And that is all I'm saying, is I'd love to even the playing field and not have the winners and losers that we are creating by the parallel plane. A less harsh measurement process that picks up those fringe homes. I'm not saying that these things should be 45 feet. It's never came out of my mouth. But I also don't think somebody with a flat lot gets 35 feet in the perfect home that they want, and somebody with topo has to build some little pyramid.
It's up to the buyer to decide what lot they buy, Jeff.
Unless they already own it.
Unless they're what?
Already own it.
Unless they already own it.
I'm kind of getting
Mr.
now.
Chairman,
Yeah, you kinda, yeah, that's,
Mr. Chairman, a point of order, please.
yeah.
I just see other citizens here that have taken their time, and I really appreciate all your input, but I'd like to see an opportunity for the other
All right.
citizens to have their say.
Fair enough, Jake. Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right. Okay. Well, we've. Desiree?
I have 3 people signed up.
Okay.
He's the right to go.
All right.
Amy Patillo, 3 Rockaway Cove. So,
Thank you for your patience, Amy.
oh, sure, thanks. No, I appreciate the opportunity to hear the conversation first, because I read through the proposal and I wanted to hear a little more explanation, because I had more clarifying questions just to try to understand some places where I wasn't following, and it helped me to see a few of those from the discussion. And then I thought I would see if I could ask some others, if that's okay. I know public comment doesn't always have back
No,
and
that's
forth,
cool.
but it seems like tonight it does. So the first question I had, because I'm new to parallel planes, is I was looking at the first paragraph, and am I understanding correctly that parallel plane is always going to be just from front to back, or is the parallel plane also going to the sides?
It would be
No.
it would be considered from all directions, but really the only one that matters is generally the one that has the highest and lowest grade, because that is where you're gonna perceive the height change relative to grade. So, in the case of Wendy's house, if we're looking at it from the street, it falls within the 35 feet. If we were to look at it from behind her house, if we took a parallel plane from the lowest grade, it would look like her house goes above it. But so that would not be accurate. You really need to look at it from both sides, taking into account the existing grade, which can be leveled out and can go over basements, pools, ponds, irregularities. And if there is a high point that is inset, you really need to know where that is with respect to the parallel plane, and you might have to measure it directly below. But if there's a basement, you wouldn't consider the basement. You would try and level out what that existing grade is, which would be on your topo.
Okay. So if, like the examples that we have in the packet that show just one side view of a house, would the parallel plane, like if I was gonna look at building a house right now in Rollingwood, would I need a parallel plane drawing that shows both the side of the house and the front of the house?
You can't consider it the same line that currently has to be on a drawing, that shows a 35-foot line above a reference datum. But in this case, your reference datum is just existing grade. And so it's the same 2D line, but you do need to see it from all 4 sides of the elevation. But again, you can't judge it from just 1 or 2. You really need to judge it from where the steepest slope is.
See,
It looks like you want to
It'd
say
be a
something.
3D model.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, the
doesn't need
difference,
to be a
yeah,
3D
the-
model,
the-
actually,
The
though.
difference between the averages and the parallel plane is rather than using an individual line to establish what the heights are gonna be, you're looking at a plane that lays over top, an imaginary plane that lays over top of the natural grade. And so,
Okay.
okay.
So it's flat then, or is it gonna have
Well,
slope?
it follows the topography.
It's just parallel to the
It's
grade.
parallel to the topography of the native grade of the.
Both from the side
Yeah.
and from the front?
So it's gonna
Correct.
change with respect to whatever
Yeah.
the grade is across each elevation.
Okay,
What we have now, as I understand it, is the flat plane. You have a point and you have a plane.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
right.
flat, and that's what is giving us the overly tall
Stuff.
imposition walls that are causing problems and comments in the neighborhood and that are the issue that we're dealing with.
okay,
This eliminates that in the sense that it requires the plane is following the dirt.
The beauty of this, and there's a lot of beauty to it, but you start with the initial survey that has to be done for any house that is being built. The first step in getting a building permit is to conduct a survey. Have a surveyor come out there and shoot the ground so you can establish what the native grade is. Based on that, you can draw a plane 35 feet above that, and you know what your limitation is right there. Unless the slope of the lot is greater than 18%, then there's allowances to accommodate that.
okay. Well, I'm gonna keep on educating myself on parallel plane. That helps me understand. I just wanted to make sure I understood it's gonna be going both from the front to the back and the sides. Okay. Another question I had was, I know that y'all weren't asked to draft an ordinance, so this is in a recommendation form, but I wondered, if you were asked under 1B for an example of how you would define a natural drainage way, do you have a answer for that?
For a natural drainage way, no, we don't. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about our stuff. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we were getting ahead of what you
Nope, just on
discussed last
1B.
week. Yeah, got you. All right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand just the basics of it without the thing that the drainage easement issue I asked y'all to address, which I really appreciate being in the footnote. I just want to make sure I understand if
And
that didn't happen, what actually is happening. So,
Well, and I think that these might be two separate things, what you're talking about, and the natural drainage way, or they might be the same thing. But I think some lots will have like a swale or something that is either, new or existing, I don't know, but I think it's sort of trying to take into account, I think these are actually that's your addition, so maybe you
Natural gains?
natural drainage ways, I think you
No, I don't think I put that in there, but the depressions maybe.
What was yours? You wanted the.
Well, I
You-
mean,
Wasn't mine?
You-
No, you had a funny comment.
you were
that
right
wanted
At the beginning of your
knolls and-
question saying,
Oh,
yes, this
no,
isn't
no,
code
no.
yet.
right,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand
And
that.
how would we define that? I think that what we were trying to do with this was include everything that would be problematic with regard to the initial grade. It's kind of a,
Trying to take away the literal, like early on, we were sort of showing the
We-
literal grade line, and I think that you should be allowed to sort of straighten that
Yeah.
out,
the first time we talked about, the parallel plane, one of the questions that came up from a P&Z member was, well, what if I have a well in the middle of what I'm trying to build? And it's now, my 35 feet disappears because it goes down this well. I've got this is my buildable area, but I got this thing in the middle of it, a depression that messes up my 35-foot height. What are you gonna do about that? And we hadn't put anything in there at that point. We said, what we ought to be able to do is somehow define what the native grade is without causing too much hardship. Recognizing too that some houses already have basements and things like that in them. If they got knocked down, well, what are you gonna measure from? Our intention is to be able to establish what the native grade is and what 35 feet above that native grade is.
And the number we found when we went back and looked after that comment came up, I found it in the code in 2 cities that they had a 25-foot area. And after I think the council meeting, we kind of decided, let's get rid of the 25-foot. Like, that's arbitrary, it could be punitive, let's just say, you can level this out. Like, to some degree, I think trying to establish original existing grade before whatever house was there that somebody tore down, I think that should almost be kind of encouraged, because you don't wanna be penalized for something that happened before. And so I think that's the intent
For
of
somebody who filled a bunch.
If
I mean,
you
we have some
yeah.
lots that
Yeah.
have been filled rather dramatically,
Yeah,
and so what do you do with that?
yeah.
That should
So-
not penalize we ought to go back to native grade and figure out how to deal with that. And that solves the problem of the well as well as
Yeah.
the fill,
Well,
in my mind.
I mean, I think we're gonna have, probably under drainage ways, we're gonna have 3 categories. Natural drainage ways that, are not defined as easements or floodplains.
I appreciate that, because I kind of looked at that and thought, well, where those definitions go may be outside of y'all's scope, or it may be something that gets sent back here, and I just thought I would see what the,
Maybe we're thinking about the falling water case, right, where the creek goes right underneath the house. I don't know.
yeah.
Might have been what we were thinking, but.
Another question I had was under paragraph 2 on the bulk planes. In the language there, it says maximum building height along the building setbacks. But then in the examples, it just shows side setback dimensions. Are those all setbacks or just side setbacks under the bulk planes?
It's all building setbacks, which are 10 foot, 15 foot, and 20 foot. And because the 30 foot is you're already at 35 feet, so we don't call out.
So that's a front setback. Oh, no, front is 30. Okay, so
Front's
it's side or back.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it includes the back setback as well.
The
Yeah.
rule is a general rule, it's just that if you have a 30-foot setback, the rule doesn't apply because
Yeah.
you're already at the maximum,
That makes sense.
Yeah.
okay?
Okay, the reason it was a little confusing is the diagram actually says side setback dimensions, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
and not side or rear.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I just wanted to make sure I understood
Yeah.
what you were proposing. Another question I had was from your comment earlier, Alex, about wanting to potentially change where it says modify existing grade to existing grade or finished grade, whichever is lower.
Mhm.
Would that be in paragraph 3?
It would be in paragraph 2.
Okay,
So that, because paragraph 3 is a separate measure from finished grade only, but it's just trying to control what happens along the side setbacks and not allow somebody to come in and build 5 feet of foundation to put a 25-foot wall on. And then you're at 30 feet because you're going off finished grade, or, maybe I didn't say that right, but maybe you build up the soil next to it or something.
To some extent, it's almost redundant in that in point number 3, maximum building height, the underlined portion there is building height may not exceed 35 feet or the parallel plane. The parallel plane is established from the very beginning with the initial survey. So regardless of finished or finished grade or native grade, it really doesn't make any difference as long as you're not going above 35 feet. You're all right.
okay. I need to think about it for a moment. I'll keep thinking on my own time though. And then my last question was, I was looking through on the 18%, and it's allowed for lots that back up to, where is that? City of Austin or wooded areas?
So it's 18% universal, but some of the lots are gonna slope down towards the street or away from the street. And in the case where it slopes away from the street, you're given a little bit more leniency because we're trying to protect the streetscape from what we've heard. So if it faces we're calling it a wooded area. We're not allowed to call it a greenbelt because I think that's too specific. So we're kind of trying to figure out what the language is. So it's currently been called
Is that in this?
maybe. It says
Just couldn't
wooded
find it.
area. Yeah, I may not have picked it up everywhere, but yeah, it says when adjoining a wooded area or city of Rollingwood boundary.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, 3. Okay, 4-3.
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry, I said City of Austin, but that was just the way I translated it in
I
my
knew
mind.
what you meant, yeah. Anyway, so that's a specific one for, that condition. You're allowed to go up to 45 feet on a 20-foot setback when you meet those criteria.
And so the question I had was, and now I guess I'm wondering if it couldn't be greenbelt, so it has to be wooded area, what would it qualify as a wooded area?
That's a good question. This is a conversation I've had with Brooke about, you know, what language we can use, because I think greenbelt is a specific thing and it may have to be designated greenbelt, but I think that what we really have are we have these creeks and drainages kind of where you live and down below Riley and Inwood Circle and all of, you know, there's these drainages that are going into kind of wooded areas that are steeply sloping because they're a drainage. And so I think that's what we're trying to say. If you're facing one of these, you know, and we haven't come up with the right language, clearly.
I think it's shorthand for areas that you can't see the back of the house from. That
Okay,
areas
Yeah,
from
that's
which
the-
where you're
It-
standing,
Yeah.
you won't be offended by the wall.
It needs fine tuning.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But that's, how
That's
that gets
the
written
intent.
into code, we don't know. But-
if something is wooded right now because the lot has never been built on and it
Okay.
no longer becomes wooded,
The wooded area is not on the lot, the wooded area is beyond the lot.
right, so my neighbor right now hasn't built out their lot. Do I get the benefit of my lot backing up to theirs?
Unless it's in the city of Austin, no.
No,
that
I don't think that's it.
So you're saying,
Say some more, I'm a little confused.
So like right now,
Okay.
my lot and my neighbor's lot have houses that are up the hill, and I would say both of us have kind of wooded areas, but more of the wooded lot is in their part right there on our drainage easement. I would, like, those are the example you've just given of where things are sloping down, right? Typically you've got two neighbors who are backing up to some sort of drainage easement.
Yeah,
And so they would have wooded lots. If one of those neighbors comes in and decides to develop on their, and terrace their house, like they could here, and take out that wooded area, would that make it no longer a wooded
or
area?
maybe it should be drainage easement, or like, yeah, we definitely need to figure out the right language that captures kind of that condition, so, I don't know. I mean,
I don't
is
know,
it
yeah.
18% slope? I think maybe.
It's under the, let's see, it's under the example that's when maximum slope is minimum of 18% plus item 3, and it's adjoining a wooded area or city of Rollingwood boundary.
right, yeah.
I have one question, Alex, on that wooded area deal. Since most of our lots that are on Timberline, slope down to a commercial area, and that commercial area has currently 100-foot setback. So most of that on Timberline then would qualify for the 45 feet.
Correct.
Well, for sure.
Am
plus
I
it's-
not, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have more intimate knowledge about Amy's lot? Can you comment on any of this?
Yes, yeah, I mean, there's a significant native wooded area between her adjacent neighbor, their property line, and their house. You know, a substantial wooded area. So, I mean, if we could come up with the right description, then, you know, Amy and John would benefit from that.
Yeah.
I'm more just trying to make sure I understand what we're about to pass as far as like the whole neighborhood, not just my lot too.
Right.
Because I think wooded area could mean a lot of different things, and so,
Yeah.
and if the reality that, like if you were to buy a lot and it qualified as wooded area because of what was behind it,
Yeah.
but then someone adjusted that lot behind you and you no longer had a wooded area, then it seems like there would be, that wouldn't be because of anything you had done as a property owner. It would be a change in in your
Yeah.
ability to build because of how your neighbor built.
Yeah, I think we were thinking mostly about like the Timberline case, or say like on Page going towards Stratford. Some of those places, you know, we've got these deep ravines that are all wooded and all that. That was kind of,
Or
at least the mental image I had of what we
Zilker
were doing.
Preserve.
Yeah.
um,
So,
yeah.
I can't help but think maybe you have a very special case that we hadn't thought about. I don't know.
Well, and I was just more asking because
Yeah.
I know that on our lot, our neighbors have kept a lot of trees right on
Yeah.
the edge, right?
Mhm.
And ours don't have quite as many trees
Yeah.
on the edge. And so I just wondered what would happen if it was
Yeah.
qualified as wooded right now, like depending on what the definition is. And then they decide to develop out that lot. Because I do have two neighbors who have really large lots and they have smaller houses that are original houses. So
John and
Okay,
Amy have
okay.
wooded areas
Yeah.
all the way around them.
we do have, we have a lot of, but I just wondered, I think it's one of those things where I think there's some things that, it's, in knowing that you all weren't asked to draft an ordinance specifically, that
Yeah.
it's just a recommendation. It does seem like the next thing that's gonna happen if this moves to P and Z and to the council is there's gonna be questions about some of these items, and I just thought I would see, to understand kind of what went into putting those words in there, what additional information I might be able to understand, that's not in here right now.
Well, that's super
Well,
helpful.
it's a
So
good
Yeah, it
question.
is very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, thank you for
The,
your time.
we may be thinking a little bit more about the words in this case. I don't know yet, but
I have a question for the group.
we've made adjustments based on our last meeting. You know, we're not above making adjustments again, you know, so.
And I don't have any suggestions other than, if there are ways to go through this and include, just from somebody who hasn't been sitting in it, think through how does it read for someone like that so that they can follow. I think that would be really helpful, because there were things like, for me, there's examples where there's lines that show finished grade and there's lines that show existing grade. But there's not any definitions for what those two things are. And so I think there's a idea probably that you all have of what the difference is between existing grade and finished grade.
Mhm.
Otherwise, item, like paragraph 2 shows finished grade and paragraph 3 shows existing grade. So it might be helpful to have some of those types of clarifications just as a member of the public so we can
We
follow
can do
along.
the best we can, but it's been my experience in dealing with codes that ultimately it's up to the building official to make a call where there's ambiguity or definitional problems in a particular situation, building official.
Well, and I can appreciate that, and I've sat on the council and also been the person looking at how do we make the code something that the building official can apply,
Right.
and so that people can read, like all of us can read it and understand what it is that we're purchasing.
Yeah.
So I think there is that, I agree with you, there is a point at which it becomes the building official, but I think just for the public to follow along who hasn't been a part of all these discussions, maybe just looking back at the language that's being used
Sure.
and.
I'm not against that, I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
that
Look, we've talked about the fact that, hey, we could get it so far down the field, and at a certain point, we're gonna have to have a professional land planner, that appropriate person, codify it
Yeah.
in such a way that hopefully it's in that realm of understanding,
I think,
For sure,
I
yeah.
think you understand our intent. And if you have an idea as to how we could best word that, we'd certainly be open to it.
Well, I
You
would
do
say,
understand our intent, don't,
I understand it now that I've heard
yeah.
here, but I didn't
Okay.
know what it was before I
Okay.
heard the discussion. So, on wooded area especially, I think
Yeah.
it was helpful to hear that there's different viewpoints even here on what that might mean and where the term might have come from. So, I would say just to look at, the reality that as this moves past you all, that if it takes multiple of you to explain it, that might be challenging for the public to follow along with. And for me, these were just questions I had, so I could kind of make sure that I understood as it moves along the questions that I had to be able to follow along. So I really appreciate you taking time to answer
Oh,
questions.
thank you. It's good.
Jeff, you
No, I found the answer.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're good.
Do we? Oh, Tom's got his hand up. Okay, what's up, Tom? Maybe? Tom, you know you have your hand up. He doesn't know. Okay, good. All right, who's next? Okay.
Hi, Wendy Hendley, 401 Vale Street. Thank you all for being so thoughtful in your approach and listening and having back and forth conversations with everyone. I think it's helped me to clarify some of my understanding, and some of the questions I came in with have been answered already. I'm here partly because my property was in the packet last week as being a property that fit the criteria of what is being proposed. And I wanted to understand how that worked and how my property would be compliant, because it didn't seem to me that it would, because it was built based off of having the 10-foot adjustment datum point for the extra height that you would get based on our current code. So after this new proposal has come out, I continue to have some questions about how it would affect my property. And it's important to me because I just built my house in Rollingwood, and we spent a lot of money on the architect and on the lot, and we love our home. We feel like it does fit into the neighborhood. We feel like we have been thoughtful in our approach with how we've used our lot. And so I have concerns that if I were to build my home again from scratch, like let's say that there's nothing there and I were to build it again, I don't think that it's allowable under the current code. And that causes me concern. Maybe I have misunderstanding. I am reading in the current proposal that if there is an existing basement, that you don't count that toward the height of the building, which would then benefit my property because it has an existing basement. But also, if you were going to remodel my property and you're going to change more than 50% of the property when you remodel, then you're required to bring the home up to code, and it wouldn't have the benefit of the basement according to our current code that says when you remodel a property, anytime you change more than 50% of it, you have to bring it up to the current code. If I were to build my property today, I'm listening to your discussion on kind of the parallel plane, and it's following the natural grade. When I did my parallel plane, I took the notes that you had on, the natural drainage ways and stuff to kind of mean that we're not going to use that against the property, and instead just draw a straight line down, right? Instead of it being a weird thing, it was just going to be a straight line down, and then you take that straight line and then you take 35 feet and you draw it up and down, and that's the parallel plane that you get in the property. My property has basically in the front, it goes like this. So if you're looking at it on the front, I'm in compliance because it's the highest grade of the property, but it does go both ways. So my question is, if you have a mound in the middle and it goes both ways, you can't really have one straight parallel plane, so you then have two parallel planes in the front?
No, the parallel plane isn't intended to be a straight or a flat, a flat piece of geometry. That's not the intention. The intention is that it follows the grade, the existing grade that as it is surveyed, which would mean it would effectively have a contour in it. It'd have contours to it.
Right, but so effectively it does have contours in it,
Yeah.
but because you're saying you're not going to count against me if I have a natural drainage way or
Right.
some sort of depression in my lot, to me,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, it means that now we're going to just take the top and take the bottom and kind of draw a straight line down and not count these little contours that that basically take away some of the the height. So it gives me a little bit of an advantage here, right? Like I can build just a little bit taller right here because I'm not getting,
And if you're mounded in the middle, like you said.
yeah, in the
Then
front.
you would actually have more height in the middle, cause you would measure whatever that true existing grade is, not the basement that was.
Yeah, and I guess that was kind of, there wasn't an example shown in the packet that showed like, okay, well, you have a lot that has something like this, and so you have two parallel planes because you're not gonna wanna, like, if your lot goes like this, you can't build higher over here. It's gonna have to follow the natural contours of the lot, and we didn't really, I'm just pointing out that that wasn't really covered in any of the examples is something that you might wanna,
Okay.
to kind of, to think about.
If we had a lot that was a tent-shaped lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have poured through so many cities that use this, and I've actually I've talked to architects in cities, I've talked to the city planners, and they don't do what you're suggesting. Cause I too was like, there's gotta be more description to this, but I didn't find it, so.
So like if it's a parallel plane, do you then just take the mound and then
Yeah.
you put the mound?
Your roof height in the middle would be measured, like if this is the ground plane where your house is and this is the parallel plane.
Okay.
Yeah, you would measure the top of your roof from whatever that point, like existing before the basement was there. Like, that's what we're saying, you kind of need to reestablish what the terrain really was like to some degree. We're trying to give people that freedom.
Yeah.
That's
Again,
yeah.
going back to, we're not trying to be punitive here. We're actually trying to understand the possibilities and accommodate those.
I think that there's a good faith effort in what's happening here and that there's been a lot of work and a lot of thought, and it's a very thoughtful approach. I do think though that it is a bit more punitive for sloped lots because if you don't have a sloped lot, it doesn't affect you at all. I think it can, in my case, I think if you look at my property, if you're looking at all four sides, I have different slopes on every side, and so I took all four sides and made the parallel plane to try to see whether or not my property would fit within that box. And on some sides of my property, it does, and on some sides of my property, it doesn't.
And that's the point. That's because that's why you have to assess it from all sides and really see what you're talking about with the high point with respect to grade, because like I said, if you looked at your house from the front, you would conclude that house is good to go, we're done.
Right.
If you looked at it from the back, you'd say, whoa, what's going on? You really have to assess it from both sides, or both sort of sloping sides.
Yeah, and so looking at my house from the back, I wouldn't, right? Like, is that why it's not in the packet this time, because it does not fit within?
No, I just didn't
It
want to keep
does.
bringing it back.
Yeah.
We put exceptions in there to make it work.
Well, the exception is if you have an existing basement that it doesn't count against you, but is that provision in there to grandfather a house in, like to specifically grandfather a house with a basement? Because if I were building a brand new house, then that wouldn't be applicable to me because that house wouldn't be there.
If you were building a brand new house over a house that you had torn down that had a basement, that's specifically what it's aimed at, so you just level over that basement. And you're not penalized. You don't have to put a divot in your roof to follow that basement.
I guess
This
part
is
of
all
the-
about the new house, not the old one.
And
right, and I guess part of the question is though, how do you define a basement? Because my basement is a daylight basement. It has doors where you can walk into the basement. It has garage doors that open up. It backs up to the bluff in the hill, and it has some topography around it. So are you defining a basement as being fully underground? Because my basement's not fully underground. If I were looking at it based on my understanding now, and I didn't have a house there before that had a daylight basement, let's just say I was building on the same topography, I don't believe, based on the rules that are being provided, that this house would be allowed. But I don't think that this house is offensive. I don't think that it doesn't go with the topography. And the provision where you have the 19% slope excludes me from being able to have that, and I back up to a green belt. But I don't think, if you look at our house from behind where there is 45 feet, that it's offensive.
Okay, let me help you out. Okay, so again, your grade is your reference datum. And if we're standing on the side of your house on Bettis and looking at your basement, that is built below your reference datum. So you can do whatever you want below your reference datum. And if you took that measurement, you're not gonna exceed 35 feet because your high point is still set back further. So that's why it is complicated. I get it. You have to really consider sort of the all sides of it, but you're not going to be penalized for something that's below grade. You can have a walkout basement. It's just, ideally we don't want to have a 45-foot wall or something that goes above.
Are you asking the question of the house that might be built after your current house is demolished?
I'm not demolishing my house.
Well, then what is the
I'm trying to understand.
What is the relevance of?
I'm trying to understand the code as a citizen, how it's written, and I can use.
It's not written yet.
I agree.
Remember that.
I'm trying to understand what's proposed,
Intent.
and I can use
hard
the
to
house
do.
I just built to help me understand it, right? So I'm using the topography that I have because I've had a survey done. I've just built a house. I have the height information, and so that's my reference that I'm using to help me understand, because I haven't gone and tried to explain this to anyone because I don't understand it, and I want to understand fully what is being proposed and not be a roadblock to anyone, or not try to. I want to make sure that I'm part of the process and I'm fully understing what's happening. That's all I'm trying to do, and I'm using this to kind of try to
Is the
understand.
basement anything
Site plan?
below
Do you
the
have your site
natural
plan?
grade?
Yeah.
Do you have your site plan with you with the topos by chance?
I don't.
Because really what you want to know, I'll just try and explain, is whatever this high point is, straight down to the grade, which I think is somewhere in here, that's the number you're worried about, not this one in this case. Because this high point is set back
So
from
if the high
this.
point is,
You're not penalized for the high point based on this grade line out here. You need to, and sometimes the houses come to that straight up, but when they're not straight up, then you have to measure whatever the grade point is on your survey, looking down, not including your basement. Like if we just consider what
Well, I
was.
think Wendy's question was, what is a basement, and she's saying she has a walkout basement, but to me, that's just a question of,
Yeah.
what is the basement to me? If you've dug out below the native grade, that's what we're trying to give you relief from.
well, my
Whether it's a swimming
basement's
pool that
at-
you're gonna pave over, whether it's a basement of
Yeah.
a typical covered four-wall kind of kid's playroom below, or whether it's your walkout basement, we're trying to give the second owner of your lot who's gonna tear your house down relief from that notch.
And I think that my basement is fully at grade, which is the confusing part because the topography of my lot goes down pretty severely in a short amount of time, and then it kind of straightens out for a while. So it's a walkout basement that's kind of partially underground. I invite anyone to come over to my house if you want to see what I'm talking about and come and see it. I would love to have you over.
Well, whether it's a full basement or partial basement, it's a basement.
It's a basement, but
But if it's below,
My-
if it's
I
not
guess
below
my
natural
point
grade, is it a
is-
basement at all? 'Cause we're
my-
trying,
my
if
point
it's
is-
not below natural grade, is it a basement at all?
the code, not code, but the language in here says that it doesn't count your basement against you, right?
And what that has nothing to do with what you built. It has to do with what used to be there.
But what used to be there is the same thing that's there now. Would it be considered a basement? Like, what is the definition of a basement? That's,
Okay.
so I think that's my question is that word existing basement put in there to grandfather my house? And how would it apply to somebody building a new house? Because my concern would be that that wording being in their existing basement could be a place where somebody could game the system and put in an existing basement or something in order to give themselves some more height.
That
But
seems like a,
with the plane, having another basement, to dig yourself a basement would give you a divot, not a more height.
right, yeah.
In my case, it gives me more height because
No,
if
it
you look
doesn't.
at, yes, it does.
No, it doesn't, because you have to consider, it's, what we're saying is, let's pretend the first thing that happened after you knocked your house down, that you filled in that basement and leveled it and made that, now your topography is established and 35 feet is everything above that. Not the basement that used to exist, but the filled in area. What would have been, had that basement not been there. And I don't see how that could be gamed. I don't know what you would be doing to try to game that situation.
I don't know what a lot of people do to game things. Like, some people change their addresses to get different setbacks. Some people, they can find creative ways to game a system, right? So
That's been the problem.
yes, and so that was just basically my point, not to have an argument over whether or not my basement should be counted against my property or not, but the language in there to say that an existing basement doesn't count against the height of the home was confusing to me, because if you were to remodel more than 50% of your home, you'd have to bring it up to conformance because of our regular code, which is the point that I was having, because our code wouldn't allow me to remodel more than 50% of my home and not bring it up to conformance. So an existing basement is just for a house that's already built. It's not a building. It's not for building, because you're not gonna build an existing basement because it has to be existing.
Okay,
Huh?
well,
This is,
I don't understand your
Yeah.
non-understanding.
okay.
yeah.
Well, so that, I guess, gives us no clarification on that issue then.
Where does it say basement? Where do we have that?
The
written?
very,
It's B of maximum
Number one,
allowable
B.
height.
We'll let the poor
at the top.
lawyer assigned to
Yeah.
make this into
It's number 1. Joe.
ordinance try to answer your question.
1B,
1B.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But the bottom line is that an existing basement would not be penalizing.
Yeah.
Do
And,
you
uh,
agree we should define basement? Do you think we could define basement?
I'm sure we could.
Because if
Somebody
there's
could.
instances where someone could come up with an
Yeah.
above ground basement, that could add a lot of confusion.
I mean,
I don't,
Basement has to.
what would an above ground basement be? I don't know of one.
Yeah.
That's something I can't define.
can you have an
No,
above
Like
grade?
you got
two
some portion
sides.
that is
If
below
it's
grade.
above grade, is it
Yeah.
a basement?
None?
Every side of my basement is above the adjacent grade, even on the front.
But then
Then it's not
what
a
you're,
basement.
you're defining that
Exactly.
to be a basement, and someone else
But
could say, well, that's your
it's
first
how
story.
I define a basement,
Yeah, that's
and
a
it was
first
what was
story.
there
Okay,
before,
that's the first story.
because
I mean,
it's
it was-
partially
You're right,
underground.
we'll take that under consideration and consider it that, that we need to put a subterranean context to it.
That-
Does it have,
Okay.
does that have, is there a retaining wall, a stem wall of some sort? Then that was cut into some natural grade.
Correct,
So it's a basement. It's below grade.
but it's at grade also.
It's a
Depending on where you
walkout
look at it.
basement, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're going to do, I understand.
I'm gonna wrap up my comment.
All right.
I'm done. But the other thing I had is I did the parallel plane with my lowest grade in my backyard, and then put 35 feet up. And so I have more than 35 feet from the back.
I
And
know, I keep trying to explain that's not how you need to look at it. You have to look at it from the side, because your house steps down. A lot of these do, so it's not a 2D thing in that case, because you're looking at it kind of from the lowest grade. And what we're really trying to encourage is that the houses kind of follow the grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at it, as your grade comes down, you know, your house steps down. So
at what point, or what perspective of my house, from which side would you count the ridge from?
well, because it's inboard on your house, you would count it from whatever the grade was directly below it, like without the basement. You kind of have to extrapolate what the grade is, which I think is somewhere like this, somewhere in here, because I think your grade,
Yeah.
But there's an exception for, you know, sloping roofs that we're trying to create as well.
Okay.
And you back up to,
But I don't have the 19 or 18
Yeah, you
feet,
don't.
so it
She
doesn't,
doesn't.
I don't
Yeah.
get the benefit of the 45 feet.
What,
yeah.
what we're going to be doing over time is, there's not a lot of appetite within city council for graphics to be included in the code. So what will likely be drafted is a manual that tries to take into consideration virtually every situation and shows you a picture of what it is that the code is intending to do. And so you've been helpful in helping us illustrate that we probably need to think about what a basement looks like, okay?
Okay. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
okay. Do we have any more? Okay.
Ryan?
Ryan Clinton, 4714 Timberline. I was not planning to speak today, but I wanted to answer Tom's question as well. And the question is, the answer is definitely a resounding no, that the changes do not resolve the concerns that at least a big portion of the community that we've spoken to has with this. And the reason for that is because it does too much. It does more than just solve the problem. As I understood it, the issue was we have a couple of houses or a few houses, somewhere probably less than 10, more than 0, maybe 5, maybe 4, maybe 3. 3 that I know of that a lot of people have objections to. And that there are some walls in those particular houses that create major, they impose, they seem too big. Nobody wants to live next to them, which I completely agree with. I wouldn't want to live next to one of them either. That problem is solved by the tenting, 100%. You do not need a parallel plane to solve the 45-foot wall. The 45-foot wall is solved by tenting 100% of the time. You do not need the parallel plane. The reason the parallel plane is brought up, I think, because I keep on hearing it, is it makes it beautiful. It's the right thing. Architects who know what they're doing would do this. That makes it a design preference, not a solution to the problem that the community had. The community had a problem with a few houses with giant walls. That's the problem. The problem is not there aren't enough split-level houses and that we need to force split-level houses on people. The problem is not we need every house to waterfall down the hill. That's not what the community has said. I haven't seen any comment anywhere, and there certainly wasn't a question that suggested, is our problem that there aren't enough houses that split level down hills? The problem was the big walls. The big walls is solved by tenting. If you don't like the averaging, and I still agree that Jeff is right, if your house is between 0 and 10 of a slope, averaging does solve the problem. And it doesn't punish you because you get a flat floor. And that's what new young homeowners want. They want an open concept first floor that's flat. I can tell you also, given the aging population of America, that people are going to want flat first floors because people move out of flat first or split level floors for 2 reasons. One is the age of their kids, and the other is either the age of themselves or their parents, because people don't want to have to go down multiple steps. People want a flat, open concept. You can give this community what it wants, which is a flat, open concept first floor, and no imposing walls, without imposing a design preference of I like it better when they go down the hills. In fact, the picture that you showed, I think a lot of people would prefer the house that has 2 stories. So it's a design preference that you like it better that it goes down the hill. But that is a design preference. That is not a solution to the problem that this group was asked to solve. It was called APA at the time. Let me see. It's a report that was referenced in some of the materials here. It's the American Society of Planning Officials report. And they looked at this in 1965. And what they came up with is the reason that there are imposing walls or that some feel too big is a perspective issue. And if we can cure the perspective issue, we can cure the problem. And they did tenting alone, plus what is effectively, if you work out the math, a 45-foot maximum, because they recommend a 35-foot height limit with a 45-foot maximum anywhere across the lot, but with 45-degree angle tenting on all sides.
You've seen the graphic in the U where they're different. Every single house is different. So it's a very complicated set of formulas.
Well, what they recommended is not complicated. It is 45-degree angle from the setbacks. That is not a complicated.
But it has a height component depending on
It
the
does,
slope.
and what I said was it makes it effectively a 45-foot maximum height at any point, because what they do is they make that 45-foot maximum at 90-degree angles, which was unnecessary. They could have just said 45 feet maximum with 45-degree angles tenting at the setbacks. That solves the problem without unnecessarily forcing split-level homes on young families.
You keep saying split level, and I don't know why you keep repeating that, except you want people to think that that's what it is. And we've tried to show a lot of examples where that is not the case, and it is a flat level. I've showed you finished floor on a lot of these. So I have a hard time every time you say split level, because that too is a design preference that sends a very negative image to people.
I agree it is negative. I agree that that's what, in my conversations with Duke and with Dave, they effectively kind of acknowledge that this does force some split level designs. It does. What you said was,
I don't think I've said
what
that
you said was,
correctly.
I'd much rather it be split level than 2-story. Split level is better than 2-story. That's what you said in our meeting. Maybe those words for you meant something different than what they said to me. But that is.
I don't recall that.
Well, I do.
Many of these examples are 2-story, a full 2-story.
Okay, so I haven't interrupted you guys today. I'd appreciate it if you didn't interrupt me, and I would really appreciate if you didn't attack my motives. My motives are not that I'm trying to trick anybody, because none of these solve my house. It's not about my house. The 18 degrees thing with 45 feet will not solve my house. It's too big of a gap. It's too big. It will not help me build on my house. So I'm not here because I have some personal motivation. I'm here because I'm trying to get at a solution that the community will adopt and embrace, and one that creates the parallel plane. On my house, by the way, it's something like this. That would be the parallel plane. And because it's multiple slopes on multiple areas, it slopes front to back. In the front, it slopes right to left. In the back, it slopes left to right.
With the 45-foot bonus that is worked back in.
Well, it would be at the bottom, right? Which is the place. I mean, it doesn't. It would save me down here. It wouldn't save me up here. I do think that there is tremendous confusion by this. One is it does clearly say a 2D line. Earlier you said you did believe it would be 2D. Others have said no, it's not. It's 3D. I can't tell from this. I will tell you I've read it 7 times and I can't make sense of it. And maybe I'm thick, but I can't. I heard Dave say that section 3 is effectively redundant, And I think I agree with that. I think you could strike 3 out, because if 35 feet above parallel plane is your maximum, you can't go above it, and you forgive anything beneath existing grade because it's a basement that you forgive, that you never go below it, so nothing's doing any work. Section 3 is not doing any work, because you've already made your maximum at 35 feet and you're not counting a basement. It says building areas concealed beneath existing grade are not included.
We don't want somebody to come in and clear out the topography and have a 45-foot wall because they've taken the 35 feet above and they've cleared out what's below and had that level of exposure on their neighbors.
But if you were changing, section 1 already does that with existing grade. So section 1 already does that. So it creates a 35-foot plane at existing grade, which means digging out wouldn't help you. And then on section 3, it says building areas concealed beneath existing grade are not included. So it doesn't change anything. I'm trying to help you.
Yeah. I realize that, yeah, it can be.
It's
misinterpreted.
unnecessarily complicated because 3 doesn't do anything. In any event, this is not. I've said from the beginning what I think this committee should be aiming for is doing the least restrictive thing to solve the consensus problem. The consensus problem is 45-foot imposing walls. Parallel plane is unneeded to cure that problem because you've already cured it in the tenting. Thank you.
Could you, wait, real quick, how would you build your house under current Rolling Wood rules?
Well, I think that they probably built it as it sits. My understanding, it wasn't, or your research suggested that the current rule wasn't in 1984 when it was built, but my house certainly suggests that it was, because under the current rule, which I have repeatedly said that I'm against, so I'm not advocating for the current rule, but under the current rule, you would have to go 10 feet.
But you bought your house under the current rule. So if you were going to redevelop it.
Which I'm not, but sure.
But we're here talking about it a lot, your lot. If you were under the current rules, what could you do that you couldn't do with what we're suggesting?
Again, I can't say this enough times. I'm not advocating for the current rule.
Okay,
I don't know why we're asking me what I want to build under the current rule when I'm not advocating for the current rule.
But you're saying that you
I also am not going to build.
Yeah.
based on what we're saying.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, please.
I'm not going to rebuild on my house. You guys, when I die, you can knock it down with me in it. Actually, everyone will be dead, hopefully, by the time I die. But my kids can knock it down with me in it, right? So my house is like Wendy's. I'm not using it as an example as to why it matters to me. I'm using it I repeatedly use it as an example as to why this matters to the community. And so that's why I use my house, because it doesn't make any sense. But the current rule doesn't either, because the current rule makes me start from 10 feet at the bottom, 10 feet above the bottom. If you have a 30-foot slope, you start at 20 feet negative, right? And I assume that that's why I have a 1-story house in the front and a 2-story house in the back, like this. It's because under the current ordinance, the highest you could go is 35 feet from 25 feet, from 10 feet above the lowest point.
Your house was built in 84?
Yes, sir.
It's 30 feet.
So 30 feet above, but did it have the 10-foot?
I think it did.
Yeah.
And it measured 5 feet out.
Right.
It didn't
So,
measure right
so
up
that's
and
why I assume that the front of my house is a 1-story house, is because you had a flat plane from 10 feet above the lowest point. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have anyone else? That's it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not sure how best to handle this. But, we've had now 2 meetings, and we've had an opportunity to speak the better part, I guess, now of 4 hours about the concerns of the folks that are in this room. We didn't know what was going to happen this evening. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago. You folks, good folks, all came. We didn't know whether it would be 20 more people this evening, or nobody at all. We never know what's gonna come. But it does seem like it's the same audience we had last week, minus one, Ms. Arno. We believe, and we've been working at this a very long time, since even before the CRC existed, that what we're proposing causes no undue harm to any property, that it does bring under control some of the outliers that we all know about, and there's probably more than 3. We believe that there are probably a number of answers to some of these questions, but we have to pick one. And, you know, we have the benefit of a couple professional architects to work through some of these things. It's true that a lot of the solutions that are being proposed by others are being used by other cities. The solution we're proposing is also used by a lot of other cities, some of them very high dollar properties. We think that some of the analogs that we've selected better represent what a rolling wood looks like, or some of the intentions of what a rolling wood should look like. So all that taken together is where our proposal is, that's where it comes from. I know it's gratifying to see you all here, and my goodness, wouldn't it have been nice to have seen you a few weeks back. You know, we're kind of where we are right now after a long, hard journey, and as much as I've heard these concerns and whatnot, I have not heard anything that is compelling to say that what we're proposing is out of square. I don't know if anybody else here in the group wants to say anything, but that's kind of my view of it, is we've spent an awful lot of time on this stuff. And there are not a whole lot of people coming here and expressing the same concerns you've got. What we're hearing out on the street is that we're doing the right thing and that we're moving forward. I'm getting an awful lot of positive feedback from folks on the work that we've done. So, you guys have anything to say?
We need to take this and digest a little bit, talk further about it, I guess.
Or make a proposal, make a motion.
Yeah, I think we got some good
Okay.
input, some stuff to consider.
Yep.
David, I think, this is Tom, look, I realize we've got some other data that we got, or other comments we got this time. And I think it'd be prudent to kind of digest that before we make a motion to take this into, any further on that.
I agree.
You agree we don't want to do it?
I agree with what Tom said.
Okay.
I mean, we've got to give, we've got some input, which we really wanted, and we've got to consider that. Now, whether that's going to weigh anything, whether that's going to change anything, I'm not going to say, but I will say that we've at least got to give it some consideration on it.
I don't feel like we've heard anything new from the last round of considerations, personally. I mean, I think there's been some good comments regarding language and clarification and, you know, ways to
Yeah.
clean this up, but I think that's something that
I
gets
would agree
handled.
with that, and also I think that we are just advising, the next step is the P&Z, where we'll go through another round of public input and questions from them. You know, I'm ready to move ahead with this.
Yeah. Duke, is there something?
What's that?
Do you have any?
Well, I agreed with what Tom said. We need to look at the input we've got tonight and today and see if there's any possible changes, nuances that we want to consider.
Ryan?
Well, apparently I have to be the moderator of a four-person meeting for our next meeting. So,
Yeah.
I think we're not quite ready to go to planning and zoning with something yet.
Okay, okay. Jeff, you have any?
Nothing else to add.
Okay. All right, given what I've just heard, you know, everything that this group has done, when we bring up a motion, it generally passes unanimously. And what I think I'm hearing is that can't happen this evening. And if that's, I am ready to go forward. But I won't bend anybody's arm to do it. And if there's something that needs to be done, and I'll be doggone if I know what it is, then I guess we gotta take the time to do it.
I think we ought to go through the definitional issues that were raised tonight and go ahead and write something and try to bring something to the next meeting that addresses these concerns and then make the decision about going forward with
Yeah.
that. So the motion I would make would be a motion to adjourn.
I have one more thing to cover.
All right.
But thank you for that, I appreciate you. I appreciate your ambitions. Okay, then, if someone wants to make a motion, by all means do. If not, we'll drop this and table until next meeting. Do I hear anybody for a motion?
Well, I'd make a motion to table it to our next meeting.
Mhm.
I second it.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to table. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? No.
No.
It's 5-2, right, got it. It,
Yeah.
it will be tabled. Okay. Let's move on to item, where is my agenda?
Well, you called off 4 and 5 earlier.
Yeah.
The other, last item, Dave, would be discussion and possible action regarding creation of an impervious cover drainage subcommittee.
Thank you very much, and that is exactly what I wanted to do. We have not had any discussion around impervious cover and drainage. I do believe that city council would like us to have some discussion around that. What our recommendations could be might be minimal, they might be major, I don't know. I just discovered, by way of one of the members of our audience here, of the existence of a thing called the IIP, which I didn't know, and it has to do with drainage and a study that was conducted in 2020. And yes, maybe it does have some impact on the work we do. I haven't found it yet, but maybe. I'm looking for volunteers. We've got enough people here, I guess everybody's here, to actually be on this committee, because I think work on it needs to begin.
I'll foolishly volunteer.
You'll foolishly volunteer.
I
appreciate
will, Dave, I will volunteer but not chair it.
it. All right, all right.
And since Ryan, let's see, Brian, you volunteered first, right?
Yes, he's chair.
That has no significance to where you're
Okay,
going, Farrell.
all right, okay. All right, that's one,
Yep.
2. We'd like to have a third?
If Brian will chair, I'll volunteer.
Absolutely. All right. So it is written, so it shall be.
What is IIP and where do I get a copy of the damn thing?
Actually, it's online.
You're gonna help me with that?
I will, I'll send you the link.
All right.
No problem. It's a dandy. There's a lot there. So, we've made that decision. We've got that recorded all right, Desiree? We've got a new subcommittee. Thank you very much. I don't know that we need to make a motion on that. We don't, do we? Do we? I think we're in good shape. We're all right. We got okay, we're fine. All right, now, Brian, would you like to make a motion?
Well, if you won't, I will. I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, very good. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nope. All right, it's 7:25. Call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Okay.
Your daughter's off to where now after school's out?
Well, my daughter's still taking finals at St. Stephen's, but my
Well-
son just graduated and he's headed to see Boulder.
It would not serve us well.
I thought one of your kids was going to Europe or something
Oh.
for the summer.
No, my son's
I don't
going
know
to
what we're gonna
NASA
do.
for
Honestly,
8
I don't know.
weeks, and then my
Okay.
daughter's
Just in
going to
Houston?
Oxford for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's probably what I
and
thought.
we're all going on Saturday.